Hey, 10th grade, Miss Boyd here, and I'm going to go through and review for your Our Town test. So if you were in the Zoom meeting, I said in there that your test comes from the questions that you've been turning in. So please remember with those questions you uploaded to turn it in. I tried to go through and make corrections on there, so make sure you're looking for those. And then before your test, which is not this Friday, but next Friday, okay? And I'm trying to think when next Friday is the 17th of April. Um, if you come across, because I'm going to go through the questions that are going to be on your test, kind of to narrow it down so you have not so many things to study. If there is a question on your question sheets for each act that you're unsure about or your answer you need clarification on, just let me know. Okay. So I'm going to start with Act 1. And well, I'll start with this. First, like always, make sure you know the title of your play and your author, and make sure you know your setting and your characters. That's a given. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each act. I'm going to say Act 1, questions, and then I'm going to give you a list. I'm going to list the numbers so that way you can focus in on what you need to study. Okay. So for Act 1, questions, we're going to have 1, which is your characters. Number 2, Joe Crowell, make sure you know who he is and tell about his life. And then 3, why it's ironic that Mrs. Gibbs is always worrying about Dr. Gibbs' health. Yes, he's a doctor, that's 1, but remember the pneumonia, okay? Then we're going to jump to 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, okay? So 6 is about the goal for the summer, which is the Courts of Beans. 7 is where they usually spend their vacation. 8 is about where Mrs. Gibbs wants to go, like her dream to go. Remember, it's Paris. And 9 is about how she might pay for it. And then 10 is the date for Act 1. Okay. Then I'm going to I'm going to jump ahead. Okay. And make sure you know number 20, which is the time capsule. Make sure you can tell me what's in there. Make sure you can explain why Our Town is put in there. And then make sure you know about 23 kind of talks about it. Make sure you know about Simon Stimson. Okay. And then it also talks about Blessed Be the Tie That Binds. And remember, that's in all 3 acts. And we kind of talked about the meaning of that song, what it means. So make sure you can also describe that as well. Act 2. So make sure you know 1 and 2, which deals with how much time has passed and the date for Act 2. Number 4, which talks about the names of the 3 different acts. Make sure you know that. Also know 5 and 6. 5, what do we learn about George's baseball career? Some of y'all just put that he's giving it up. That's not where that question was going. It's more along the lines of what kind of baseball player is he? And then 6 is all about what's causing him to give that up, which is getting married to Emily. Okay. Make sure you can describe 7, how people are meant to go through life 2 by 2. What does that mean? And then 8, of course, kind of echoes irony, Mrs. Gibbs worrying about everybody else's health. Okay. And then we're going to number 12. So make sure you can tell me which parts besides the stage manager that the person in that role plays. Okay, there should be 2. Some of y'all had 1. Also, for number 19, that quote, make sure you can describe that. Okay, that'll be important. Let me double check something on here. Okay, you'll see that quote on your test. Also, let me move that. With Act 3 questions, Okay. Number one, the setting. Okay. And also, I mean, it's a cemetery, but also make sure you know how they set the stage up using chairs and things like that. Number two, make sure you know how much time has passed. Number three, the date of this act. Make sure you know the changes that have happened, fewer horses, more cars, which is number four. Make sure you know number five, who's died and how they died. A lot of you put who died, but you didn't say how they died. So make sure you know that. Number six, the quote that's there, make sure you can explain that. Okay. And then number seven, what happens to you after you die, that you become weaned away. Make sure you can explain what that means. It's fine that you say weaned, but what does that mean? A lot of you just literally copied that from the book. So make sure you know that the ties, the emotional ties, your song, that bind you to the earth and the people there slowly begin to dissipate, and that emotional link is no longer there, like Mrs. Gibbs in that scene. Make sure you know who dies and how she dies. Number 12, that's 11, 10 and 11. Number 12, what did Emily and George buy with Mrs. Gibbs' legacy? So remember, it's not just the farm. They already had the farm. They were given the farm, but the legacy talks about the water fountain thing, okay, that fills itself. Number 13, the quote that's there, shut up in little boxes, the irony, etc. Make sure you can explain that. Make sure for 14 you can tell me what day Emily decides to revisit. So know the date and that it's her 12th birthday. Make sure you know how old she is when she dies. And number 18 has a quote, Earth, you're too wonderful for anyone to realize you. Make sure you can explain that. That's 18. Okay. And then for number 19, some of y'all listed 2 or 3. Make sure, because if you just said Grover's Corner, World, Mom and Dad, you're missing the gist of it, because most of the things she lists are normal everyday things that we do, like a warm bath in the morning, coffee, a ticking clock. And for number 20, how these things relate to the theme of the play. So, those are your questions that you'll need to kind of focus on. Literally, your test comes from your questions. It's not going to pull from as far as theme and things that aren't addressed on your questions. Again, the things that might not come from your questions but are referenced a little bit in here, which is a given. Know who your author is, know your setting, and then you should be comfortable naming and or describing any of your characters in this play. Okay. And if you know those questions and those things about your play, you should be good for your Our Town test.